Gonzaga Nation SI, Adam Morrison, Dan Dickau here. Preview the LMU home game and the road trip to Stockton to play the Pacific Tigers, who might be the most surprising team in the league. First off, I guess, Mo, it's a Thursday night home game against LMU, and then it's a road game against the Pacific Tigers. I'm not going on the road. Are you going to Stockton?
It's not the area, it's the timing. We can make fun of Stockton all we want, but we live in Spokane in January, so
it's cold.
Let's just make sure that we need to be fair to the gracious people of Northern California. But no, I'm not going to make it. My daughter has 2 games. Obviously, we'll watch it on TV. But yeah, they've been surprising. So yeah, we'll see.
That's a nice politically correct way to put it. I've been to Stockton for games before, and I've got a game I'm calling for CBS in a different location, so that's why I won't be there. But talk about LMU first. They've been really good in the non-conference. They beat Georgetown, who's not a very good team anymore in the Big East, but they beat Wake Forest, who's having a nice season in the WCC. They hadn't lost back-to-back games until this past week, where now they've lost 3 in a row, but they're still sitting at 500 in conference.
Yeah, it's a team that's on the rise, I guess. So they got that good Shelton point guard that's good. It's averaging almost 19 points a game. That Leah Pepe's one of the most interesting bigs that we have in our conference, plays really hard, not tremendously skilled, but one of the most athletic that we've seen. We'll mix it up with anybody. Yeah, it's a good club that kind of has some belief now. They're trying to build the right way. I think it's one of the programs in the WCC that has the best chance to get back to being solid, just because it's LA. If you could figure out getting kids in, you can get the 3rd tier or 2nd tier California kid, which is always really good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Kids that are not going to UCLA, USC, but are really good players. You can get that type of player. So yeah, it's going to be it's always a weird game against them, because sometimes they play out of their minds, but most of the time it's usually just a physical slugfest, and you look up like, oh, we won by 20, but it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what type of team shows up, but it's always, honestly, it's always a physical game against LMU.
It is. I saw them last week. I called their game at St. Mary's, and so I saw him in person. Leah Pepe, he's a beast. He reminds me of JP Batista, who steps out and shoot threes. Yeah. I think JP was much better on the interior, but as far as physical build and how they move on the floor, very similar. They play hard, like you mentioned. They don't back down. That was the one thing. St. Mary's is one of the best defensive teams in the country now, and it's weird to say that, but when you look analytically and numbers-wise, they're dang good on the defensive end. That's really where they've made the jump. But LMU made that game really physical. They didn't quit. They were down double digits. They cut it late to, I think, 8. Just made it interesting before they lost by 15 or so. But when you talk about the ability to go from kind of lower in the conference to middle of the pack and maybe challenge at some point, how difficult is that in your eyes?
I think it's based off multiple factors. Athletic department wants to, has to want to win. And then I think you got to get lucky with the type of recruit you get. And then you got to have some things go your way scheduling wise, like in the early non-conference, some of these teams get invited to these, the holiday tournaments, Thanksgiving tournaments, but they're always considered like okay, if you play this team, we will win. You got to win some of those. Like Portland was great in the PK80, but they beat Villanova, is not very good, and then lost 2 other games. You know what I mean? Great, but you got to get some of those wins. I don't know, man. I think it's a lot to do with the type of student you're allowed to bring in to your university for recruiting.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. No, I've had plenty of conversations with coaches over the years, and I'm sure you have too. Kyle Bankhead told me this about USD when he was at USD. And Billy Greer told me the same thing, is like, because of the academic requirements at a lot of these WCC schools, you kind of only, or as long as it's early in your coaching career, you might have one bullet where you can go to the athletic department and admissions and be like, look, we need this kid to get accepted. And if you use it and it doesn't work out, you're screwed for about 4 or 5 more years. Yeah. Where if you use it and it works out, kid gets his degree, he's a good student, then you can go ask again. So I think that's something that's overlooked many times.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, type of players you bring in, and that's college sports. Most of them are won during recruiting. National championships are won during recruiting. I mean, look at Georgia football. Do you think they just X and O the hell out of people, or do they just they win in recruiting? And then look at the arc with Gonzaga basketball, making 2 Final Fours, 2 national championship games. McDonald's All-Americans, first round, lottery picks, recruiting.
Yeah.
It's the type of player you can bring.
You and I have talked a lot over the years, basketball, X's and O's, terminology, workouts, how we both see the game. And I think you'd be a tremendous coach.
Thanks.
I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys that see the game uniquely, and you're one of them. But what held you back? And I don't want to say held you back, because maybe it wouldn't be your passion to be a college coach. Some people have family, some people have other business interests. But what would be the one thing you like and or dislike about coaching at the college level?
I think, obviously I was a GA, so I got a little taste of it. My dad was a college coach for 20 years, so I understand that. I do like just being in the gym and the development of a team, bringing kids in, getting people to work together. All that stuff sounds cliche, but it is rewarding. Even when we watch our Gonzaga teams from afar, you kind of feel like you're a part of it. So it's like, it's fun when you're a coach. The thing I wouldn't like, and I experienced this, is the grind that you have to put in. I mean, people don't realize like how much film you got to break down, and you can't half-ass it. It's just, you can't. And if you want to be successful, you have to be extremely detailed, and that takes a lot of time. So, it's interesting to see some guys that are really good at coaching couldn't play, and vice versa. Yeah. You got to have the right mind for it too. Like, I understand like workouts and all that stuff, but like, you're better at this, but like, draw up a side OB with 3 seconds left. Like, you got to have that already in your head. Yes. It has to be preloaded. And, I coach an AAU team, and, obviously not that high on that level of expertise, but like, I've been in spots where like, I can't even draw up like, and it hasn't caught, but like, practice and like, late game situation, like, man, I don't have anything. Yeah. And you have to have it like preloaded. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I like how you call it preloaded, because you got to have sideline out of bounds with late clock or catch and shoots. Yes. Baseline out of bounds, all of that. Like, and then on the flip side, you got to be prepared for defensively, if it's a timeout, what the opponent's going to run. Yep. I think for me, it would be the recruiting of kids. Like, and then you mentioned it, you got to get players. That's your lifeblood of your program. But, I now have a son who's in high school. If I were a college coach, I wouldn't want to be talking to another kid who would be the similar age to my son and like recruiting that kid over my son, whether or not my son's at that same level or will be at that same level. I think that would be a unique dynamic to coaching at the college level.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably tough if you're, the mid-tier type of programs where you just get overlooked or you don't have NIL and all that stuff. So it would be frustrating, but it's interesting to see how some of these guys, like I said, weren't good players and are really good coaches, or vice versa, or both. You know what I'm saying? Like, good players and good coaches. Like, it's just, I think you got to have a special mind. You got to have a special like demeanor for it. Yeah. Can't do the yelling and screaming anymore, which I think is fine. It just doesn't fly. But also, you see it, the teams that are always solid every single year have like a self-discipline, and that comes from your staff. And we've seen the teams that are not disciplined, who are talented, and you see them every year, and you're like, well, they'll be 500 again. It's like, how are they 500? Because they have no self-discipline. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it goes back to the details you talked about like watching film and breaking things down. You were a player. I was a player. Players are smarter than a lot of the outsiders realize. We know when a coach knows the answer or doesn't know the answer, has put the time and effort in or not.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you'll figure it out. It's like, when a teacher's teaching you or something, it's BS. Yeah. You can just feel it. Even if you're a kid, you're like, that doesn't make sense, or this is unprepared. Same thing with a coach. So I've been lucky, obviously played for really good coaches my whole career. But it's interesting to see some of these guys that you don't think are great coaches, and you look at their records and they still get jobs, and or they cheat and then they go somewhere else and they get another job. And so that's a whole other podcast for something else.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting.
So last LMU topic before we move on to Pacific. Kelele Pepe's got the most unique haircut maybe in college basketball with the mullet. You had long hair. I had long hair. Give me your Gonzaga best hair besides yourself or myself.
I don't know, Dan. You go first, man. I have no idea.
It's got to be Roni.
Yeah, Roni was just, he had the fro and everything, and then obviously braided it up. And I'm trying to think. Matt Bolden, I guess. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Stuff.
I had to throw that one out there for you. Kind of a little curveball. Pacific Tigers.
Yeah.
They're playing much better basketball than they have in recent years. Well, I guess I can't necessarily say that. Last year they struggled. Damon Stoudemire had them competing.
Going, yeah.
They got to the fourth, which I thought Damon did a really good job. It's a difficult place to get to. It's a difficult place to play. What are your thoughts leading into this game?
Obviously, if we take care of business, LMU will be 6-0 at the time. Kind of have a stranglehold on the league and make St. Mary's chase us. So I think that is usually just a weird game. It's a weird area as far as like stuff to do, and it's usually just compacted to the hotel. Usually, most times we're allowed to go out. It's not the case where we're at down in Stockton, so I think it's just a different vibe when you get down there. Crowd's usually just like halfway full. It's never like sold out. It's never excited, and it looks like a JC gym. It's nothing against that, but it looks like an old junior college, which I think it is. So it's a weird vibe playing in that arena. But Damon's teams were always physical and played us tough, so it was like you better be ready to go. There's a different physicality to those teams. So it'll be interesting to see what, how our game travels on the road. Obviously, the last 3 road games we've won by a total of 8 points.
Yeah.
So that's something to be concerned about. But obviously, that Pacific team is, not the same ilk as BYU or anything like that.
Dog days of the league is really what we're getting into because, you've got a couple weeks under your belt. You've got a little separation. St. Mary's has got some separation. You're not preparing week of for St. Mary's, which is going to be a heck of a game in a couple weeks. How would you have navigated this as a player? Do you come up with something to drive yourself? Do you just look to the coaches to keep you focused?
I never. Did you ever do that as a player? No. Like, oh, this team sucks, so I'm not going to practice hard or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just.
If you fall into that trap, you really don't love the game.
Yeah,
you're just going through the motions.
Yeah, no, exactly. I never honestly tried to overlook teams. I mean, I'm sure there was some human nature time when you'd play a preseason game and you played an NAI, you'd be like, okay, you know what I mean? But I just never understood that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to convince yourself, you got to try to lie to yourself as a group too, not just an individual, that this team could beat you. And if we don't play good, we don't show up with energy, just all the cliche shit, but it's so true. Yeah. Like, you can get beaten, and so then you get out and you got to be a little pissed off. And I just don't get that.
I don't either. And I think some of that has crept in at different levels of basketball because of the NBA, where they give guys games off for load management. I talked to Avery Johnson yesterday, and we had talked about a couple different things, NBA stuff, college, whatever. And like we were talking about with the NBA, it is so different now. Like when you look at the NBA compared to the times that we played, it is a completely different game from what I see. Do you still watch the NBA? Do you enjoy it? What's your take?
Yeah, I watched, mostly the playoffs, I guess, was when the interest peaks. There's no inside players anymore. There's very few, and they're just or the 3-and-D type of guys, or they're, no back to the basket is basically what I'm saying. So that part of the game is different, and I just think the guys are so much skilled as a whole now. Everybody's like, they don't play defense. I'm like, I think everybody's figured out, what it takes to be a great shooter, great ball handler. Like, so everybody's doing that now. So then everybody's like highly, highly skilled. It's the same thing with quarterbacks now in the NFL. They're all playing 7-on-7 when they're 12. Nobody did that 20 years ago. Same thing now. Like, my daughter has a trainer that I send her to. You do training, you know what I'm saying? Like my dad just was like, go out and shoot.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like we did some drills, but now it's like you go on YouTube. So like I think everybody's just better as a whole, and guys are so good. So, you know, with the inflated scoring, some people are like, there's no defense. I'm like, well, yeah, partly true, but I think guys just are great shooters, and all of them. And so like you'll see these games where, and it's wild to watch games now, like team would be down 15, nobody even flinches.
No, not at all.
And you know, on the other side, they're like, oh, you know, this game's not over. It used to be like you're up 15 in ball game.
Yeah.
Like easily ball game.
Well, I agree. I think the skill level from top to bottom in the league is different. The one thing I don't like is the picking of teams. Like LeBron handpicks some of the guys that he wants to play with, and doesn't work out for right or wrong. I mean, he's got the influence and power to be able to do that. I think that's just become the business side of basketball that's a little different. But I was never in a position to be like, demand, hey, I want to play here.
Yeah.
The only time I ever had the chance to do that, you know, as a free agent, I could pick where I went out of a couple different scenarios. They wasn't like it was a mind-blowing, you know, experience where like I get that guy. It was like, hey, there's a roster spot. There's a couple teams I can pick from, you know. But it's interesting. I'm always curious at different guys' takes who's played at that level.
Yeah, it's a different game now. Like I said, I was still playing with back to the basket guys, and they don't even like exist anymore.
Who was the best back to the basket guy you played with? Emeka Okafor or who?
Yeah, Mech was Pau Gasol.
Oh, how did I forget Pau?
You know what I mean? And then, but it was just the league. I'm just saying as a whole, as a league.
Yeah.
You know, Tim Duncan, obviously, you know what I'm saying? You don't even, Joel Embiid's the only guy I can even think of. Jokic a little bit, but he brings it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who's a back to the basket guy now? None.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. And that's only 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, a guy like Zach Randolph, he was unbelievable. We were teammates together in Portland. He was really good. He had a great run in New York and then Memphis. But yeah, guys like that.
You won't see him in the
undersized
power
bulldog power forward that just bully you down to a sweet spot.
Yeah. It's not there anymore. So it's interesting. It's fun to watch. I think the scoring's great. But again, like, you know, my interest peaks during the playoffs. It's hard to watch it.
It's hard to watch 82 games.
It is. It's hard to watch just a random, you know, just a random regular season game, unless, you know, that's why they brought gambling into it, because it piques more interest for people to tune in.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, there you have it. Adam Morrison, Dan Dickau, Gonzaga Nation SI. Keep liking, subscribing, and reviewing the content, and we will be back next week. Have yourself a good day.